But we had to really be disciplined. You know, everyone stop listening to talk radio, stop reading the papers, start managing up and getting everyone on the same page. So we're going to do things a little bit differently, and you know, hopefully change the fortunes of the Red Sox. So our motto, which we kept repeating in the office because we hit on a number of players early on. Baseball is really like a 50-50 proposition. You know, you're predicting future performance. So if you have the best people and the best systems, you know, best case scenario, you can shift the odds in your favor of any one transaction to like 55-45 in your favor. If you do a great job, you have the best scouts, the best analysts, you build the best systems, you have the best data, maybe you can shift it from 50-50 to 55-45. Which is like Vegas. That's all, you know, they have, what, 52-48, and you see how big these buildings are. So that was our approach to do that, but we just kept telling ourselves, we don't know shit. We don't know shit. We wrote it in big words in the office. We didn't want to get carried away thinking that we had all the answers or thinking that our new way of doing things was the right way to do it. Now, we wanted to have the courage of our convictions and not back down from anything and think big. But we also didn't want to get carried away with our own BS. So we kept reminding ourselves, we don't know shit, we don't know shit. And we went out in that first off season, it was pretty fun. You know, we needed hitters. We had a great core of players as Manny Ramirez and Nomar Garciaparra and Pedro Martinez. But the Sox had neglected the bottom 2/3 of the rosters for decades. So we actually didn't have any money to spend. We cut payroll that year, but we found there were so many market inefficiencies pre-Moneyball. The market rewarded things that didn't correlate to winning as well as other factors. Like the market rewarded batting average more than on-base percentage, for an example, even though on-base percentage correlates to runs scored and therefore winning much better than batting average. So back then it was like shooting fish in a barrel. We needed some hitters to round out our lineup. David Ortiz, we signed for 1 year, $1.25 million that first offseason. We signed Bill Miller, 2-year contract, $2 million. He went on to win the batting title, hit .325 for us that next year. Kevin Millar was being released on his way to Japan. There wasn't another major league team that wanted him, and we broke this gentleman's agreement not to claim someone on their way to Japan, stepped in and claimed him, and we got him. He hit 50 doubles, ended up hitting 5th for us that year. So we hit on a number of players. There were so many obvious competitive advantages that maybe we could see because we were new and we weren't looking through predetermined lenses. And that team went on to, you know, break all kinds of offensive records, got to Game 7 of the 2003 ALCS at Yankee Stadium. We had a 3-run lead with 5 outs to go, and we're going to get to the World Series in our first year. And then, Grady Little, you know, Pedro Martinez stayed in too long. Aaron Boone hit a home run and broke our hearts. And Yankees went to the World Series. And it was another heartbreak, kind of reminded me of the Bill Buckner experience as a 12-year-old. You can never get too far away from that. But it just galvanized us. The next year we went out, needed pitching. We traded for Curt Schilling. We signed Keith Foulke. We found ourselves ultimately back 1 year to the date later in Yankee Stadium, down 3-0 to the Yankees. But first, real quick, one moment happened that year that led to a really important lesson for me. The team we had assembled was the most talented team in baseball in 2004, or the Red Sox, but we were playing 500 ball all year. We had poor infield defense, and we had what turned out to be a really awkward, tough, tense dynamic in our clubhouse. So trade deadline comes around, July 31st, 2004. We decide that in an attempt to fix the defense and fix the clubhouse dynamic, if we can trade our Nomar Garciaparra, who's the face of the franchise, we should do it, even though it would be really unpopular. So we work hard on this deal. It's a 4-team trade, really complicated. It happens with 5 seconds to go before the deadline. And we end up trading Nomar for two defensively elite players who were having bad seasons with the bat, Orlando Cabrera and Doug Mankiewicz. So it was a really risky move. This is my second year as GM. 12 of us who all lived together, we made that trade, and then I go off to have the press conference. And on the way to the press conference, I get a phone call from my twin brother again. And he says, I'm on the Cape, I'm listening to EEI, they're saying you just traded Nomar Garciaparra for two 230 hitters. What did you do? So I told, no, these guys are going to be fine. I told you not to listen to WEEI. Everything will be okay. So I go to the press conference, and then I walk back to the office, which had been bustling with all this activity, adrenaline of trading the face of the franchise. We were all, proud of each other that we were sort of standing firm for our ideals and making the deal. And it was on a Saturday, and when I get back to the office, everyone's gone. There's not a single person there. I'm by myself. I look up on the big screen, big picture of Nomar smiling with a Cubs hat superimposed on him. And I felt like the loneliest person in the world. And that night was the first night I ever had to take an Ambien to go to sleep. My mind was racing. I'm like, what did I do? I just traded one of the best players in baseball. This is going to be a really short stint as general manager, and it was a bit of a tough time. We played terribly for 2 weeks after that, and it got lonelier and lonelier. And then we caught fire. We went 45-12 down the stretch, ended up down 3-0 to the Yankees. Kevin Millar walks, Dave Roberts steals the base, Bill Miller gets a single up the middle, David Ortiz hits a walk-off home run. Now it's 3-1 against the Yankees. Ortiz walks off the next day, 3-2. Curt Schilling, bloody sock game, game 6, 3-3. We're going back to Yankee Stadium, game 7, exactly a year later, and we win that game. And I felt so fortunate again, kind of a precursor to what I saw in the weight room with our Cubs players during game 7. I got to be around that team a lot. It was the first time any team had come back from 3-0 in a best-of-7 series in baseball history. I think it had only happened one other time. It was like in hockey in like the 40s or something. And I was asking myself, like, how did they do that? Why did we do that? And it really jumped out at me that they did it because they were connected with each other. They were not sitting there saying, I need to come back and win this series for myself. It was Bill Miller looking at David Ortiz and saying, like, I am not letting David Ortiz's season end like this. It was Bill Miller looking at Pedro Martinez saying, I am not letting his season end like this. And around the room, you had 25 guys, especially after the trade and reshaping the chemistry a little bit, 25 guys who were connected with each other and really care about each other. It was the first time it became so obvious to me, this thing that I really believe in and that should have been right in front of my face the whole time, but the importance of connection, that human beings can accomplish great things for one another and for the group that they probably could not accomplish for themselves on their own behalf. And it led to such great things. So we beat the Yankees. We went on to sweep the Cardinals in the World Series, and some lifelong memories I'll never forget. Flying back from St. Louis, we kind of celebrated all night, and then we landed at Logan Airport at 7 in the morning. And it was a drive we've made hundreds, thousands of times in our life from Logan back to Fenway Park. But this one, after having won the World Series, it was like a scene out of a movie. You had traffic stopped. You'd see construction workers crying on buildings on the side of the street, hugging each other, businessmen and businesswomen embracing. You had people running down the expressway following the team bus on the way back to Fenway Park. And then we passed a cemetery, and on the gravestones already, just hours after we won the World Series, there were Red Sox pennants and Red Sox hats draped over these tombstones for the grandparents who hadn't quite lived to see it. It was just remarkable how much one outcome of one baseball game can affect an entire region and connect people together and connect generations. And it ended up being the most redeeming, most meaningful part of my experience in Boston. We ended up winning again 3 years later in 2007. The 2004 World Series gave us credibility, allowed us to build something that could really last. We jumped in to the farm system. We drafted John Lester and Jonathan Papelbon and Dustin Pedroia and Jacoby Ellsbury and all these guys, and they became the core of the team that won again in 2007. It was really meaningful for us to win with homegrown players and create something that was lasting. And then, admittedly, I think towards the end of my tenure with the Red Sox, I started to make some mistakes. And as I've asked myself a lot, looking back on it, why and what is the pattern behind the mistakes that I've made in my career? And for me, if I'm being brutally honest with myself, my greatest mistakes have always been when I've gotten too close to a situation. I get too emotional in making a decision. I get too hasty, too impulsive. I get away from my process. I no longer do something I pride myself in, which is turning over an issue 1,000 different ways and looking at it from 1,000 different perspectives. I fail to pause and sort of detach myself and look at an issue from 10,000 feet to make sure that I'm seeing it the right way. And I just react, and I take the easy way out. And that's the common thread between the worst decisions that I've ever made. It's something that I've tried to learn from. A quick example, you guys remember Tim Wakefield, the old knuckleball pitcher? We had a catcher. He was a really hard guy to catch. Doug Mirabelli could catch Tim Wakefield in his sleep. One year, we traded him. We decided we needed to get a younger, better catcher come up. That next season, Josh Bard, who replaced Doug Mirabelli as Tim Wakefield's personal catcher, could not catch the knuckleball. Every single knuckleball Wakefield threw was going to the backstop. Bard was walking back, picking it up. It destabilized the team. It was like the talk of the team, and the clubhouse was panicking a little bit. I was on the road trip with the team while this was all going down. So I'm seeing 25 guys panic. I'm seeing Josh Bard like in the fetal position between innings, realizing he's got no chance to catch Tim Wakefield. And instead of taking a step back, realizing that we had an issue, but that there are 1,000 different ways to attack it, talking to my guys, getting creative, finding a creative solution that would put us in a good place, I felt the panic. I felt the emotion. I was too close to the situation. We ended up making a panic trade where we sent Josh Bard back along with a good prospect to the Padres to get Doug Mirabelli back. There's a funny story about that. Actually, I had Josh Bard in my phone as Josh B, and I called him to make the trade. I called to let him know about the deal, and I said, "Josh, it's Theo." He goes, "Uh-oh, what's going on?" I said, "Yeah, we had to make a trade. We had to bring in a catcher who could catch Tim Wakefield. Unfortunately, you're in the deal." And he goes, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You're trading me for a backup catcher?" I said, "Yeah, we have to." He said, "Theo, this is Josh Beckett, you just called me, reigning Cy Young Award winner." So, almost traded a Cy Young Award winner for a backup catcher because I hadn't gone through my process. But you guys probably remember Mirabelli. It was kind of a ridiculous, absurd scene. He got a police escort back from Logan. He flew in because he had to race to the ballpark to catch Tim Wakefield that night. And he put on his uniform in the police car, and he actually went out and caught the first inning without a cup on. It was like the first time in Major League history someone caught an inning with no cup on. He pulled it off. And then the other, the more serious mistake that I made, again, followed the same pattern. It was right towards the end with Boston, that 2010, 2011 offseason. We had a long run of success. We made the playoffs 6 out of 7 years. But in 2010, I knew in my heart that we needed a transitional year. We had some young players that we needed to break in. My instinct was to be honest with the fans about it, to be transparent about it. So I went out and I told the fans, I said, we're going to do everything we can to compete this year, but we are looking at this as a bridge year to get to 2011, to break in some of our young players. And that didn't go over so well in some circles. And there was a real crackback against my comments from ownership and from the WEI sector of the fan base and whatnot. And so that year, I was probably more at odds with my bosses than I've ever been in my career. We were winning, kind of hanging on, but they actually held like these fan focus groups with Red Sox fans asking why ratings were down a little bit at our TV station. And the grand conclusions from the focus group that I was presented with was, it's not enough to win, you have to win sexier. You have to win in a more exciting fashion. And you need big stars. And some things that were just like antithetical to the way we'd built up the team and always being disciplined and finding values and relying on young players. So instead of taking a step back and realizing, okay, I don't necessarily believe in that method, and I don't like being reactive to focus groups or fans, and I think ultimately the only thing we need to do is win, and then our team will market itself. I got too emotional about it. I didn't handle it well, and I was reactive. And so I basically said, okay, we can win, we can get stars, we can win sexy, and that was the off season, and went out and traded for Adrian Gonzalez, gave him a 7-year contract, signed Carl Crawford to a big, long contract, and basically said, took a shortcut, which is something I never did, to build an uber team. And that team was the most talented team in baseball. We were on a 110-win pace in 2011, but the personalities weren't right. We hadn't put it together the right way. We had taken shortcuts. We hadn't followed our normal process. And in September of 2011, that team collapsed under its own weight and really fell apart in the clubhouse. And I really blame myself for not taking a step back. And it reminds me of another lesson I learned from those mistakes, which is I kept looking at those mistakes and the period when I wasn't making good decisions. I kept asking myself, I kept telling myself that my environment was to blame. You know, we made the Mirabelli trade because I was too close to the situation. They were panicking in the clubhouse. We had gone all in 2011 because ownership was telling us we couldn't be patient, and they had these focus groups going on, and they wanted to win sexier. And what I learned over time is that's a total cop-out. I'm a manager. You guys are all managers. We are completely responsible for our own environment. I can't blame my environment for forcing me into a decision I'm not comfortable with. That part of being a manager and being a leader is taking charge of your environment, setting the tone, confronting things that you don't like the right way and working together to solve them. And it's something that really hit home. I vowed never to do that again, that I would never use my environment or circumstances as an excuse ever again, and that I'd be, even under difficult circumstances, way more proactive in shaping the environment, managing up better, even if it involved telling them some things they didn't want to hear, and staying true to my ideals, and never again would I sort of blame my environment. I'm the GM. It's my environment. You know, I'm the one who creates the environment. So that was an important lesson for me. And right around that time, it had been 10 years with the Red Sox. The atmosphere had started to feel suffocating to me, in part because it was, and in part because I just wasn't looking at it the right way. And I read this book by Bill Walsh right that summer when the team was doing really well, where he talked about after 10 years, it can be important to move on as a sports executive or a sports leader, to re-energize the franchise and also to get a fresh perspective, change your environment in order to get a fresh perspective and re-energize yourself as well. And so I started thinking about leaving, and right then the Cubs job became open. And I'll be honest, you know, I told you how meaningful 2004 was to me, seeing how a championship can affect that many people in such an intimate way. My friends at the Red Sox and I had started talking about the Cubs right after we won the 2004 World Series. There's only one place in baseball that you can go to win in a way that would resonate so meaningfully with so many different people. And it kind of became the holy grail. So all this stuff's going on at the same time, the job's open, and I decide to take it and to try to apply a lot of the lessons that I'd learned at the Red Sox. Now, the Cubs had not won the World Series since 1908. They hadn't even gotten close. They'd only won one playoff series in the history of the franchise since 1908. They'd had back-to-back winning seasons. I think it was 2 or 3 times the whole time. In 2011, when this was going down, they were the oldest team in the division, the worst team in the division, the most expensive team in the division, which is like the Holy Trinity. And they were just crying out for change. And you know, the owner there kept asking me, he's like, well, can you change the culture? Can you come here? Can you change the culture? I really want you to change the culture. And I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about what culture really means. It's such a buzzword, right? Everyone talks about culture, culture, culture. But in baseball, you don't really pick your head up and think about it. But I think I had a sense of what it was, and I thought at the time I had learned some things from things I'd done right at the Red Sox, things I'd done wrong at the Red Sox, that there was a way to change the culture, both in the front office and with the team on the field. And that's what we tried to do. And applying the things from the Red Sox years, I felt like the best culture in the front office first had to be based on trust, integrity, selflessness, and transparency. All the guys I work with have to know that I'm about the organization first, not myself. I need to look at everyone in the office and know they're about the organization first, not about themselves. I had to set the tone by working incredibly hard. I had to be a connector. I had to be selfless. We had to do it together. I think something I tell our guys, the best organizations are made by 1,000 small sacrifices when nobody is looking. That's how we should judge ourselves. Are we willing to make those 1,000 little sacrifices, putting the group first, going the extra mile, pulling the all-nighter when no one's looking, and we'll get where we want to go? And we were able to create that culture. It was, it wasn't the 20-something kids with no children, no families, no marriages, working the 100-hour weeks. We were now all approaching 40 with kids, but we kept, with a little bit better work-life balance, we kept the same fun mentality in the office. We had a really flat structure. We had like a boiler room type setup. Anyone could ask anyone any questions. We still didn't know shit. We thought we were going to have to get to the right answer. We needed to question our own assumptions and really pick each other up. And what's really interesting is through applying some of those principles, the exact same thing started to happen with the team on the field. Eventually, not right away. But we wanted the very same type of culture in the clubhouse, based on trust, based on respect, based on integrity, selflessness, transparency. And to do that in baseball, you have to give the players freedom. The NFL is a culture based on meetings. They meet every single day, multiple times a day, because they only play once a week. And you can sort of browbeat the players into following a certain modus operandi. In baseball, you play 162 times in 183 days. So if you try to get them to follow a certain plan of action that's too dogmatic or too detailed, it's going to collapse upon itself. So you have to give the players freedom, and you have to ask them to prioritize the group and winning. And the best thing we ever did to help accomplish that culture was hire a manager named Joe Madden, who is better than anyone I've ever been around at just letting players relax and be themselves. His dress code, for example, is if you think you look hot, wear it. Which our young players really responded to. Our slogan for the year was "Try not to suck," which our young players really responded to. We had, every day, you'd come to the clubhouse, there'd be zoo animals running around, all kinds of diversions. We had, penguins running around the clubhouse that the players were playing with and their families were playing. We had snakes slithering around. We actually messed up one time and had those on the same day, and the snake ate the penguin, but that wasn't good. But you find high-character players and give them this kind of freedom, and amazing things can happen. Again, like learning from some of those lessons with the Red Sox teams, with Manny Ramirez, who has since had a really big conversion, and we actually hired him as a coach, was a huge pain in our backside as a player, was totally antithetical to this type of culture that I'm describing. We would not have another Manny Ramirez in Chicago. We vowed not to. Instead, we told our scouts, spend more time on character, spend more time on the person than you do on the tools, the skills, the player. We want only high-character guys who are going to put the team first. Dig into their backgrounds, find out what kind of teammates they are. Give me examples of adversity they faced on the field and how they overcame it, adversity they faced off the field and how they overcame it. What do their teammates say about them? Are they connectors? And so we ended up we ended up with this incredible group of young, talented players who were not only exceptional ball players, but exceptional people. And I'm seeing I'm running short on time, so I'll kind of skip a little bit and reconnect this back to the end where we ended up. So, we went through this dramatic rebuild in Chicago. For the sake of transparency, again, because if we're going to be transparent as a culture, we had to be with our fans. We told them right from the get-go, we're going to be bad for a few years. We're going to go through some losing seasons, but you have our word that we will work extremely hard and leave no stone unturned, be single-minded about finding young impact talent with high character. And we're going to build this nucleus, and when we do, we're going to put our foot on the accelerator and we're going to win. And we were so open with our fans, they really responded to it. I'll never forget one time in the lean years when we were losing 100 games a year, I was walking home after a demoralizing 10-0 loss, and this 85-year-old woman came up to me in all her Cubs gear, and she said, "Oh, we love what you're doing. We totally get it about the rebuild, about young players. Just do me one favor, please hurry up. When's it going to be? I'm not sure how many good years I have left." And so I didn't know what to say, so I just gave her a big hug and I said, "Take your vitamins," and I just kept walking home. I actually saw her again at the parade after we won the World Series, which was pretty cool, and she made it all the way there to see it, which is great.